I want it based on whether they're involved in fraud.
Is it really so hard to answer that question,
Yes.
Scott?
I want it.
Yes.
Is it so hard
the only
to sit there and
criteria
say we shouldn't target people based on their ethnicity?
The only criteria I have is fraud.
We shouldn't target people based on their ethnicity? I can say that.
Can you say that?
But Scott Jennings won't say that. Why won't you say that,
Because
Scott?
I don't agree that that's what's happening. I don't agree with your fallacy. I don't agree with your stupid
ad hominem attacks are the lowest form of argument, Scott.
The lowest form of argument is to come out here and accuse me of some kind of race-based argument. There's $9 billion in fraud,
what you believe,
and you don't care.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Josh Rogan corner and silence Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. The part people forget is childcare subsidy fraud isn't some Minnesota-only issue. It happens across the country when programs are understaffed, oversight is weak, and loopholes are easy to exploit. So if you actually care about fixing it, you go after the system and the individuals who broke the law, not a whole group of people. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Josh Rogan destroy Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
This has been a sort of perfect storm for MAGA in many ways to do what they've really always wanted to do, which is to make this not just about illegal immigration, but also about legal immigration. And then also to zoom in on one particular community. And by the way, we should not ignore, there is an active, potentially governor's race that Republicans want to compete in, and maybe they don't want the My Pillow guy to win, as Pete said yesterday. But all of that is playing here.
Sure. Well, setting the politics aside here, because there are real lives on the line and real families and communities at risk. And I think we need to acknowledge that although no one's for fraud, everyone's against fraud, what's going on here is very clear. It's a targeting of the Somali and Somali-American communities that was directed by the President of the United States in public, on television, repeatedly. He called them garbage. He said they should go back to where they came from. And then all of a sudden, you've got the Treasury Secretary, HHS, DHS, the FBI, and, you know, every MAGA YouTuber flooding the Somali community in what can obviously be known as a targeted attack on this community, which is, by the way, overwhelmingly the vast majority are American citizens. And that's not the way that law enforcement is supposed to work. Law enforcement is evidence-based, not identity-based, in the country of the United States of America, as far as I'm aware. And so once you have this overtly cruel and massive attention, what I call an abuse of law enforcement resources to target one small community for where they come from, when they came to America, the color of their skin, and the fact that they don't, you know, match the president's politics for whatever reason in the president's perception, that's the wrong way to do it, in my opinion. That's not the way that America is supposed to work. That doesn't excuse the fraud. It just says that we should apply a law enforcement colorblind. And once you start targeting these communities, which are American citizens, by the way, I think we're going down the wrong moral and ethical approach. And it's bad politics because, by the way, these people vote. Yeah, Somali Americans vote and Muslims vote.
And that honestly, that's part of the
that's not the important
thing, part of the problem for a lot of conservatives. But evidence-based, not identity-based, is what Josh said. That is supposed to be how the law is supposed to work. Why is it that right now everything seems to be about whether or not the people involved here are Somali, even though one of the biggest people who were involved in one of these frauds was not Somali at all. She was a white woman. So respond to that.
Doesn't that disprove everything he just argued?
Well,
they're obviously rounding up everybody who is involved in fraud.
No, they're not rounding up everybody.
They're all talking about Somalis. That's the point.
I want them to round up anyone who is involved in defrauding American taxpayers of what apparently amounts to $9 billion in a very, very small state. Somali, whether they're citizens, immigrants, white, I don't care.
You don't care if they target
one fraud to stop.
But do you support the targeting of this one community or not?
I support the targeting.
You think that's the right thing to do?
I support the targeting of people engaged in fraud.
But do you support the targeting of the Somali-American community as directed by the President of the United States based on their ethnicity?
That's not what he said.
That's it.
That is precisely what he said.
If they are engaged in fraud and because they're American citizens, should that make them immune?
That's a straw man argument.
No.
Just answer the question.
I did.
I
want anyone involved in fraud to be targeted. Anyone involved in fraud.
Here's the part that backs Josh up with real-world facts. Fraud in childcare subsidies and social programs is not remotely unique to Somali communities. Federal and state audits have repeatedly found that the biggest drivers of fraud are weak oversight, inconsistent verification, and rushed funding pipelines, especially when programs expand quickly or get emergency money. That's why you'll often see fraud rings involving multiple groups, including contractors, administrators, and yes, plenty of non-immigrant US-born people. So if the public narrative becomes Somalis are the problem, that's already a clue the conversation isn't evidence first anymore, it's identity first. And it matters because when law enforcement gets shaped by political rhetoric, it changes behavior on the ground. You get over-policing, fear in communities that are mostly law-abiding, and under-reporting of legitimate concerns because people don't trust authorities. That's not hypothetical. It's exactly what happens in communities that feel singled out, whether we're talking about Muslims after 9/11s, Latino communities during immigration crackdowns, or black neighborhoods during tough-on-crime eras. The simplest test is this. If the goal is stopping fraud, the messaging should focus on the scheme, the loopholes, and the specific defendants, not the ethnicity of the neighborhood. When the loudest headline becomes, "Look who did it," you're not fixing a system. You're building a scapegoat. So yeah, prosecute fraud aggressively. But if the politics requires turning one group into the face of it, Josh is right to call that out.
I want it based on whether they're involved in
Is it
fraud.
so really so hard to answer that question?
Yes.
I
Scott?
want it.
Yes.
Is it
I
so
said
hard
the only
to sit there and
criteria
say we shouldn't target people based on their ethnicity?
The only criteria I
Can you
have
say
is fraud.
we shouldn't
Can you
target
say-
people based on
can
their
you
ethnicity?
say-
I
can
can
you-
say that.
can
Can
you
you
say
say
that-
that? But
Shouldn't
Scott
target people
Jennings
for
won't
that.
say that. Why won't you say that,
Because
Scott?
I don't agree that that's what's happening. I don't agree with your fallacy. I don't agree with your stupid
obvious.
question.
Ad hominem
It
attacks
is-
are the
it is-
lowest form of argument, Scott.
The lowest form of
You can tell
argument
me
is to come out
stupid.
here and accuse me of some kind of
I know,
race-based
I-
argument. There's
I'm
$9 billion
asking you for
in
what
fraud,
you believe.
and you don't care. That's the main problem.
So look,
That's
we,
ridiculous.
hold on a
I think
second.
we've seen
Hold on a
clearly what
second.
Scott thinks about this.
Hold on a
Yeah, I
second.
think we've seen
So
clearly
there are a
that you
couple
don't
of
care
things.
about $9 billion.
Yesterday we had some tweets from the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who made this all part of a conspiracy of Democrats to import voters and have them become Americans and then obtain political power because of that. So that's part of the conversation that's happening in conservative circles. But the other part of the conversation I think that is not happening is they're throwing around, this 42-minute video as proof, rock solid proof that that there was fraud. And Whitney Wild, one of our colleagues here at CNN, spoke to Nick Shirley about this earlier today. Listen to what he said.
How do you know that all the allegations that you're making are true?
How do I know that they're true? Well, we showed you guys what was happening, and then you guys can go ahead and make your own analysis.
We're coming so we can make our own analysis. Are you 100% sure you're true?
Yeah, I am 100% sure I'm true.
He goes to the facilities. Some of them had already been closed for some time. Minnesota officials say that each of the facilities that he visited had been visited at least once in the last 6 months. And so far, they found no evidence of fraud. So shouldn't he have to provide actual evidence of fraud before just walking up to a building and saying, fraud is happening here?
Who is he? Like, who gave this guy license to go around and say, I couldn't get into daycare centers, the doors were locked? Like, nobody should be able to walk into a daycare center because the doors are locked. These random vigilante justice, something that people in this country know a lot about, these random vigilante justice seekers who ordain themselves like some sort of law enforcement expert, like he's a random YouTuber. And I just find it laughable that the party of the self-proclaimed pro-life people are celebrating cutting off funding to children. The white evangelical crowd who purports to uphold these Christian values are celebrating targeting communities because of their ethnicity and cutting off care to children. It's utterly ridiculous. And I have to say, only a deplorable human being cannot decisively say it is wrong to target this community. We all heard what Donald Trump said to pretend that this is some sort of opinion versus this opinion. No, we hear this right now. And so we have to call these things out with outrage, with righteous indignation that this type of thing, one day it's the Somali community, the next day it's another community. What is hard about saying this is awful? What is hard about saying we should all care about children?
Josh and Tiffany are right to be alarmed, not just about the accusations, but about the way this whole thing is being carried out. When you start letting a random YouTuber do drive-by investigations, filming buildings he can't even legally enter, and then calling it rock-solid proof, you're basically replacing evidence with vibes. And that's not accountability, that's a stunt. In any legitimate fraud case, you need receipts, audited financial records, irregular billing patterns, documentation of ghost children, falsified attendance logs, or whistleblower testimony that holds up under scrutiny. Not the door was locked, so it must be fraud. Most daycare centers should have locked doors. It's literally a child safety standard. And the bigger issue Josh and Tiffany are getting at is, why is the public narrative always built around who the suspects are instead of how the fraud happened? Because fraud in childcare subsidy systems usually comes from predictable holes, weak oversight, overwhelmed agencies, paper-based verification, contractors who know how to game reimbursement formulas, and lawmakers who expand programs without building enforcement capacity. That can happen in any community. When the story becomes, this ethnic group is scamming us, that's not law enforcement, that's scapegoating. Also, Tiffany's point about the hypocrisy hits hard when you look at how these funding freezes actually work. When officials cut off funds broadly, it doesn't just punish guilty people. It disrupts legitimate providers and working families who rely on childcare to keep their jobs. And that ripple effect is brutal. Parents miss work, kids lose stability, and the system gets even messier. If you genuinely care about children, you don't cheerlead mass shutdowns based on viral content. You push targeted investigations and reforms that protect services while prosecuting criminals. And the J.D. Vance-style rhetoric about importing voters is exactly why people are calling this identity-based. That conspiracy framing turns policy into paranoia, and it encourages the public to see entire communities as suspicious by default.
And it's not just racist and xenophobic, it's actually dangerous, because what Donald Trump is doing in targeting this community, it's putting American citizens in danger because it is putting a target on their back. But there's something else that I think is really disturbing, to your point about who this YouTuber is, and that all of a sudden, because he made this video that has gone viral, now DHS and FBI are putting resources into this community all of a sudden.
Well, they're not. I mean, because they actually had
did.
already. Well, that's the thing. I mean, those videos that we were showing, those are
but they're
performative.
pretending like
they're
they
walking
just
into
found this out.
They're walking into a deli and asking questions and then saying, "Have a nice day." That's not how you investigate fraud.
Correct.
Actually, to the credit of DOJ, they have been investigating fraud. They have been prosecuting people the way that you actually prosecute people, not sending people to
right,
delis.
even under Joe Biden's
And
DOJ,
there's other
that's
targeting
where
of the
it started.
Somali community before this. I mean, the Trump administration removed the temporary protected status for Somali refugees. So there's already been a series of steps. This YouTuber is just the rooster taking credit for the sunrise, okay? And the organized government effort to target this community, it was well underway. And as a parent of a 3-year-old in daycare, I can tell you, the doors should be locked, okay? You got to lock the doors. I pay thousands of dollars. I can't get into that daycare center. If I go up, it's locked, okay? And I actually have a reason to be there. So you better lock the doors. And by the way, they're definitely locked when the school's not on. And the guy went there before the school opened, and then he's like, how come they won't let me into the school? It wasn't even open, okay?
So, Pete, just real quick, I mean, cutting off HHS dollars to Minnesota, cutting off SBA dollars to Minnesota, politically, that feels like it could backfire.
Yeah, Republicans are winning this argument right now. I don't know if that's the best decision to make. I think it's an overreaction. Hopefully it's overturned, or at least the legitimately operating daycare centers receive the funds that are appropriated to them. But a couple things here. Shining a brighter national light on this story is what may finally bring fraud to an end in the state of Minnesota. The Fox affiliate in Minneapolis-St. Paul today rehashed all the investigatory work that they have done dating back to 2013.
Yeah.
This has been happening
it has
since
been.
2013
And
at
it's
least.
been being
And guess
covered
who's
since
been governor
2013.
since 2019? Tim Walz, who is the conspiracy, is incompetent leadership. He has been overseeing a state that is allowing fraud to happen rampantly all across
I'm
the
glad
state.
that Republicans have woken up to the incredible investigative work that's been done by local journalists
Finally,
and national journalists on this story for many, many years. So I'm glad. I'm glad that that's finally something that they're paying attention to.
What drives me crazy about this debate is how some folks keep trying to pretend this is just a fraud story with no political or human consequences, when the way it's being handled is exactly what makes Josh and Abby's warnings so important. Because yes, prosecute fraud, absolutely, but you don't do it by creating a national moral panic around one specific immigrant community and then acting shocked when that community becomes a target. We've seen this pattern before. You attach a whole scandal to one group, the rhetoric goes viral, and suddenly regular people who have nothing to do with any wrongdoing start getting harassed, threatened, and treated like suspects just for existing. That's not hypothetical. The FBI and DHS have had to respond to spikes in hate crimes and harassment every time national leaders single out a group with inflammatory language. When the president is amplifying it, that effect multiplies. And Abby's point about the investigation style is dead on. Real fraud cases are built on audits, bank records, billing anomalies, licensing data, and paper trails, not some guy walking up to a building with a camera going, "The door is locked." Like, locked doors are literally childcare 101. Any daycare that doesn't have controlled access is the one that should worry parents. So if a viral clip is being treated like evidence, it tells you we're not talking about accountability. We're talking about content and optics. And here's the other thing. Blanket funding freezes are the laziest tool in the box. They don't surgically hit the bad actors. They hit parents, kids, and legit providers who already operate on thin margins. Cutting off childcare money doesn't punish fraudsters. It punishes working families who now scramble for care or lose jobs. That's how you turn a fraud investigation into a community-wide crisis. So yeah, go after fraud hard. But if your strategy requires scapegoating a whole community and turning YouTube into law enforcement, you're not protecting kids. You're creating collateral damage.
Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.